Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Clubhouse Conversations. Today on the podcast, we have Emily Catan. Emily plays on the threes. She comes to us from the States. So it's going to be really interesting to get a perspective on how she views Irish hockey, her experiences in the States, and we'll get into the sort of debate about inclusivity in hockey as well and how we can improve that over time. So without further ado, Emily, welcome.
Thanks so much. Great to be here. I'm excited.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to talking to you. I think this is going to be one of the more different ones than what we've had so far. Will, how are you keeping? Because I know we're obviously back up and playing and stuff. Has it been nice to be back on the pitch?
So nice. I've just been delighted to get out and have something in the evening to look forward to, more social, and actually getting some fitness out of it too. So absolutely delighted to be back to playing hockey.
Nice. I think you're the first person that we've interviewed since things have opened up again. So we've all been talking in hypotheticals and, I'd love to be back on the pitch. So it's great to actually now have been back on the pitch and get to talk about that a little bit.
I know. And I think we haven't all played in so long. I can't even remember the last training I went to. It probably was a lot darker in the winter leading up to Christmas. So it's been a long stretch without any hockey.
Sure. A lot darker and a lot colder.
Yes.
Yeah, my God. What would it be in October, maybe? Was it October when we got shut down?
I think October, yeah. And then I went to the States for November, Thanksgiving, all the way to Christmas. And then obviously we didn't have anything in the winter. So, I was thinking this year, though, winter was a lot colder than last year. Maybe it's just working from home as well. You feel it because you're not in like a heated office. But I was thinking, I don't remember it being that bad the year before when we had the last winter of training before COVID kicked off. So I kind of felt grateful we didn't have training this year. I thought it was way colder of a winter than last year.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you're probably right. It definitely felt a lot colder all the time. Although we probably didn't have snow or anything, but it definitely felt cold and chilly, not moving as much, getting as active. Like definitely happy to have been there, being home and not out on the pitch. Well, listen, look, we'll kick off, and you've got a very interesting background. We started this way with everybody, sort of their background in hockey and stuff. And tell us, you set up your own hockey club just to play the game, right? So you got a really interesting story. So I'll pass it over to you. Tell us a little bit about like your early days and your early days with hockey.
Sure. So I grew up in Mountain View, California, where you would imagine hockey actually isn't that big of a sport. And I actually have to clarify that we would have said field hockey because in the States, you have to clarify between ice hockey and field hockey. If you say hockey, most people probably think you mean ice hockey. So I grew up in Mountain View in the Bay Area, which is just south of San Francisco. And my mom is Irish. So she grew up playing or being at least around the sport here. And she obviously wanted me to have the sport growing up. She knew this guy also from Ireland. Connor is his name. And I remember so vividly the first time I ever picked up a stick. Connor, he was trying to grow the sport amongst the youth in the Bay Area. And he would teach kids how to play field hockey at Stanford University. They had a Astro pitch. And again, in the Bay Area, there weren't really a lot of pitches available at the Standard because it wasn't a big sport. So in my high school and even throughout club days, we actually played matches on an American football field, which just has kind of the little black beads in it, you know what I mean? But Connor taught me, and there was a group of us, I remember as kids, how to play the sport. And to me, I mean, I didn't know different because I just learned so young. I think I was probably 7 when I first started to play. But again, at the time, there wasn't clubs to join. So my mom and a few of the other moms and dads of those that Connor taught started our own club. And just as the sport kept growing, more clubs kept popping up and there was enough of a league or a tournament to have throughout the spring. So I played a lot growing up there. And then in high school, the school I went to had field hockey. But again, a lot of the girls that joined the team came from soccer or other sports and really had to learn how to play from like freshman tryouts in high school. So completely different. You wouldn't have had girls growing up with that sport naturally. And even worse off, there were no boys options for field hockey in high school. And there are currently none at college. I think there's the national team, but that's it. So the sport in the West Coast for sure is growing, but not at the same pace, definitely, as it got to the East Coast. And then I actually got recruited to play at university. So I played on scholarship at UC Berkeley or Cal Berkeley for 4 years, Division I. So I've had a long stint in field hockey. I took a break for a couple of years after graduating, but have picked it up and brought all of my equipment to Dublin because I knew I was going to play when I moved here.
Amazing. Amazing. What a story. That's so when you were there, sort of set up your own club, did you guys have much outside competition, or was it mostly like internal with people just wanted to play in your club?
So I suppose with setting it up, that's probably a question for my mom and dad because they're the ones who helped kind of chair and run it and find coaches. But there were definitely other clubs in the area. So I don't know, we were called Lightning. There was a team called the Fly. Like, it was random names, to be honest. It doesn't make sense compared to what you're used to here in the Dublin world and club system. But there were probably, I'm making a guess here, but maybe 10 clubs in the Bay Area, and they were different. So different coaches, different management, different leadership, but you'd see the same faces at every tournament. And, you know, it was almost like a local rivalry because we were so few. And then you could see across the statewide, there were definitely other clubs as well. So you could go fly and play in a tournament, which was a great opportunity for recruiting for university. But within the Bay Area, it was a relatively small pool of competition.
Yeah, outside of the college stuff and maybe some school stuff, you really go for your weekend tournaments and your invitationals. Like, was it Festival, Disney?
Festival.
And
Yep, exactly.
is Disney the one in
Cal,
What's the other one? Cal Cup?
Cal Cup is the one in Los Angeles, and that was every year we would go. It falls, I think, on Memorial Day weekend, so it's end of May, and it's the best tournament ever. There's like so many hockey vendors, you know, there's like food trucks and stuff, and then there's all divisions all the way from like 6 and under all the way up to 40 and over or something. So Cal Cup is a 3 or 4 day long tournament, and then Disney, I think that one's in Florida where the Disney land is, and then Festival, that one switched locations, but when I used to go was in Palm Springs.
Oh, cool. The hot spots to play hockey.
Yeah, like totally not, but why not?
Yeah. Class. I think Cal Cup there's always been rumors and rumbles with certainly amongst the twos when we were coming up, was like, oh, we put together a team and go over and try to win it. Like, there's always been those kind of talks about it, even like, there's prize, there's money, like hockey and money in Ireland, put those together. We're like, ooh, can we do it? But we've obviously never gotten around to it. Those conversations keep coming. Worth it?
You should. Cal Cup is the best, and like especially as you're older, definitely there's like a little beer garden near that main pitch where the Supers play. I think they call it the Super Division. But that was so much of my childhood growing up. I haven't been in so long. I know a lot of ex-collegiate teams or ex D1 or whatever, D1 to D3 college players always put together teams to go. But I think they canceled last year's, obviously. But I heard that there is Cal Cup in July, so I'm looking forward to seeing it all on my socials. Everyone who's going to go back to Cal Cup.
Yeah, that's exciting because talk about a bundling of the initial pandemic, but my God, you guys are put up. Like, it's mental. Like proper like wartime effort, just everyone pitch in and get it done. Fair play.
Yeah.
Would you consider heading home and getting a vaccine, because it'd be a lot quicker than trying to wait and get it here?
I know, I was thinking that earlier. I was thinking I could go back and get it. Everyone in my age group is fully vaccinated, not wearing masks, going out to bars, going out to restaurants indoors. So I definitely considered it. I think I'm going to hang on the summer here, like why leave Ireland when it is its nicest at the moment? And potentially there's a sight of traveling abroad at the end of July. But yeah, I think I'll go home early fall. Well, let's see, early fall, depending, or I'll go again over the holidays.
Yeah, oh, that'd be good. Oh, you like Thanksgiving kind of time? Go back.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm leaving early fall during preseason, because that's going to be our training season.
Christian listens to this. You'll know.
Yeah, and Christian's going to listen to this. He'll drop me.
I think he might have tuned out when he heard beer garden at Cal Cup. He's already gone to organize it. He's in order.
Yeah, he's already created a WhatsApp group, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. You can't say anything around the man. You'll be in a group like that. Like,
yeah.
Can't say much. So that's class. So then tell us a little bit about your college experience, because that's pretty cool. Like Cal Berkeley, that's pretty big uni. Like, that's pretty good going.
Yeah, it was actually a really surreal experience getting recruited there, because I had always thought about playing in university. I'm not very, I'm small, so I always felt I was a little maybe underdeveloped as a player growing up. I was really quick and good with the ball, but I wouldn't have always been maybe the noticed player in high school. So looking back, funny enough, I was actually planning to go to a camp in the East Coast in Boston to get recruited for a school there. So my mom said, well, why don't you go to the Cal camp? It's local. You'll get really intensive training and you can prepare for the camp in Boston. Cause that was kind of, I had, emailed the recruiters of that school and they said, yep, come out, have a look. It was all kind of in the work. So the Cal camp was very last second that I went. And after the 4 days, it's a very intensive training. You get to live in the dorms during the summer. And then it's, I think, 4 days and it's 3 sessions per day. So it's like skills training, you get food, and then you go to an afternoon session, you get dinner, and then the evening is like match play. So I did that camp the summer before my last year of high school, which again, relatively late. Most people would have already had commitments verbally or contractually to go to university, maybe their sophomore or junior year. So I was in the late group. And at the end of the camp, like literally the coach just came up to me, Shelly, and she said, we should have a talk in my office and we'll give you a tour of the facilities. And I had kind of heard from some of the girls who were coaching saying that, Shelly was really impressed with you. And I was like, no, there's no way that she's going to recruit me. Like, I've heard the class is full for this year. There's no way. So anyways, we go after and Shelly brings me into the beautiful new high performance center. It was called. They had like Olympic grade weightlifting sessions, ice baths, amazing locker rooms. She gave me the full tour of the whole center. And she just said, like, why haven't I seen you? I'm like, what do you mean? I've been reaching out. I've been trying to get on your radar. I've been trying to, come for unofficial visits. And she's like, yeah, we're really impressed with you. You're super quick. We feel you have great ability to grow in the team. And she says, like, I've already offered out my spots, but do you want to play on my team? And I honestly was so surprised because, again, I'd come at a last second decision. My mom and dad and I drove from like the field to the office, and in the car they're like, well, obviously you're going to take it, right? And I was like, I don't know, and never considered this, but I verbally committed there on the spot after the camp. And then I still went to Boston to play in that camp, but I told them before I visited, look, I actually just verbally committed to Cal Berkeley. So it was the craziest week of my life, to be honest, because there I went in thinking I was still not sure what I was going to do for college, and I left the camp with a spot on the team.
That's awesome. Do you mind me asking, before we dig a little deeper into that, what was that for Northeastern?
Boston? Amherst. Well, actually, it's outside of Boston, but Amherst. Yeah.
Okay. We coached at one of those kind of like recruit them and decamp things for Northeastern. Yeah. But like similar kind of thing. There's a girl now playing for Northeastern who was at the camp the week that we were doing, and just kind of like, it's mad how that works. I suppose we've spoken to Irish people, and you get a feel for it from Irish people, but it's a very different process and situation, because you, like, over in the States, and you can maybe delve into this a little bit deeper, is like, it's a whole process. There's tons of rules and regulations behind it. Yeah. NCAA controls it all, whereas I think we've talked with Jill, Shin, like even Orla's talked about it before. Like, we maybe as Irish people going over and getting those scholarships and stuff don't appreciate what that actually means, particularly to a lot of Americans who are over there and in it. So you might tell us a little bit about the process and some of the, like, I suppose, rules and like hoops you have to jump through in terms of that recruitment process. Or maybe you didn't have to, because like you said, you committed on the spot there, that maybe you didn't have to jump through as many hoops. But maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, like, I can't remember the specifics of the rules per se, but the process in general, like, to get recruited, a lot of folks would have made a recruitment video. So either footage of them playing in matches, like skills videos, all compiled, sent that around to as many coaches or whatever programs they were interested. And then you almost build like a CV of your hockey achievements. So I would have put, I went to the Junior Olympics in whatever year, or I was part of the Futures program, which was kind of the pipeline of development for the national squads for the US team. So you would put all of whatever tournaments you've won. I don't know if your high school has like championship leagues, if you've ever won awards like MVP or best player. So you almost build this CV of your hockey achievements. Then you're blasting out emails to all the coaches just saying, here, I'm interested in your program, would love to chat. potentially they invite you to an unofficial visit, which means you pay your way there. And then if they're really interested, they fly you out as an official recruit, and they would, put together an itinerary of you visiting the school, living with one of the girls in the dorms, going to class, kind of shadowing to really see, are you a fit for that university and the team? So it's just a lengthy process. And, at every tournament, coaches would line up and have their notebooks, and it's just all the players trying to go get FaceTime and talk time. So it's just like, recruiting for a job in real world. Like, it's honestly so much pressure and so much, pre-planning at that age, like when you're 15 and 16, and then on top of it, to your point about internationals coming over, like, obviously, I think international hockey has a different standard, and so many programs are seeking international players for both the hockey side of it, but it also helps universities to get international students in. And most of the time, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I would have assumed that they are on a full scholarship, so they get a lot of the tuition paid for and potentially accommodations, where I think I was on a partial scholarship at Cal. So, I didn't have everything covered, but like, that's huge, because how else would we get them to stay when they can potentially get education cheaper or for little in their home countries? So yeah, like, we always saw the international girls getting kind of the best deals in terms of the scholarship and university education and process, but it's just a different world and perspective growing up. Like, it's very serious in the Division I level and the NCAAs, and there isn't maybe the social element of college life that you would expect when you're playing in a D1 sport. We were a dry season. We didn't go out and drink after winning games, and we didn't go out that much on weekends. If we were traveling, we weren't there to see the football games, the American football game days, or the kind of sorority fraternity experience. So you do give up a lot when you're playing a D1 sport. And I think that's partially a disconnect from the European way of hockey, where, pints after a match or after training in the summer is normal. And, you come to the States and there's so many rules at the NCAA level, or even in the D1 level.
Yeah. And you're kind of run as almost professional athletes, which obviously has its benefits. Professional athletes don't get paid. Although you could argue, if you are getting some scholarship, there is in some way payment, because
it's your education that they're paying for, basically.
Yeah. And we're not used to it. We're at most, we maybe have to pay $3,000 each year, because that's our admin fees. But like, you're talking tens of thousands a year, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, all in all, again, it was a great experience, I have to say. Like, I loved playing. It taught me some of the greatest lessons in life and so far, and even career and stuff. But man, those were very challenging times, like managing a full schedule, a full-time job, really. Like, every day was training or a game or a physio session or film session or team dinner. And then on top of that, like, four classes, 3 classes a day, and then including travel to those different states to play. So it was an intense experience for sure.
Yeah, because that can be like a leave Thursday, Friday, not home till Sunday, because you maybe play 2 away, and it's a schedule. And not only are you expected to attend class, you're expected to perform in class, right? Like, and I imagine
minimum GPA.
Do you remember what your minimum GPA was? Like, they're usually pretty high, right?
I think like 3.0 at least, which is, average, right? That's like, I guess, getting B's all the time in class. But there are definitely like levels. Say if you're falling below a certain level, then you might be like given a strike, versus if you're really low, then you would completely not be eligible to play. So there are definitely kind of levels to that. But yeah, I mean, you're expected to, field hockey. We prided ourselves on being one of the best in academics as well. So, and Berkeley, is a really, really intense school, hard to get into regularly. So it definitely was a lot to manage and balance. But we, like, to your point, we would fly Thursday morning, usually wake up call. It's like 5 o'clock, meet at the bus for 6, fly to wherever we were flying, train. Right after the flight, we would get straight on the bus, bus to the campus and the pitch, train, dinner, pre-game meeting. So that would be scouting the other team's film, discussing the starting lineup, discussing our structure, etc. then Saturday match, ice bath, recovery, dinner, homework, film session, then Sunday game, same thing, ice bath after the game, quick showers, get dressed, and then bus to the airport, fly home, usually land back in Berkeley by like 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. Sorry. And then sleep, wake up for a recovery session, which is just like stretching and kind of like light cycle potentially with our trainer. And then class, Tuesday off, and then Wednesday start over again. So yeah, that was pretty much the case for August all the way till November, if you were lucky enough to make it all the way to the end. And preseason was like 2 or 3 weeks before all of that kicked off, and that's like 3 times per day training, team bonding sessions, building, everything.
And then did you guys have a spring season, or were you free once you hit like November, December to just focus on academics for the second half of the year?
Yeah, so November and December is definitely more of a quiet period, especially because that leads into exams right before the holidays. But it might be 1 meeting a week with the team, definitely not intense training once we were done with season. And then back in January, the spring, like off season technically. For us, I think January, February was all conditioning. So just straight running, weightlifting for 2 months. And then they would add back in hockey, say maybe two to 3 times per week. And then on the other days it was running, but no commitments on Saturdays and Sundays in the spring, except for maybe a few friendlies, or what we would call scrimmages. I don't know if that's like a word here, but I said that once in training when I first joined Pembroke. I was like, oh, are we scrimmaging another club? And they're like, what's that? And I was like, when you just play a fake match. And I'm like, that's a friendly. And so anyways, we would do friendlies in the spring, maybe with other universities, but definitely no travel, no flying in the spring, which was nice.
Gives you a little bit of switch off time and time to enjoy. And I presume you're not in dry season that side of the year as well.
Yeah, no, definitely not dry season. That was like the spring was the Saturdays and Sundays, well, Friday to Sunday, I suppose, the weekends, to be able to go out and kind of be a normal college student.
Yeah.
But we were very much so, and our coach literally said this all the time, like the jersey never comes off. So you always had to be conscious of how you're presenting yourself, because, athletes are kind of not always looked after, but people might recognize. And yeah, that we were always very conscious of our reputation on the team.
Yeah, that the celebrity culture, I suppose, in America is a lot more heightened than here. So even your athletes are certain, at least local level, people are keeping an eye out for you, like, hey, you're so and so. So I suppose there's always a bit of a spotlight. There's always someone watching. But then it's like dead stop pretty much once you finish college, right? Like, I know there's a growing club scene for adult hockey, but it's maybe some pickup games and some like mixed 8-a-side leagues or whatever, but there's nothing massively serious, right?
No, I mean, not to my awareness, especially in the Bay. I think there's a few clubs in the Bay, and I'll shout out to Connor again. He's the one who taught me to play, and like I know he's involved in quite a few in the Bay Area. But again, their only like real Astro pitches are Berkeley, Stanford, and Davis, I guess. So like they're UC Davis. So there aren't that many in California. So the clubs, the adult clubs, just have to play on recreational public like fields. So that could be grass, that could be the American football type of turf. So you never know what you're getting. And I'm unaware of what it's like in other kind of hockey hubs, hotspots. Potentially the East Coast has more, but yeah, unless you're going to play for the national team, like I always knew that my hockey career would end. And at a certain point, you kind of look at, okay, academics has to be first if I'm going to have to get a real job after college and not play the sport as my job.
Yeah, that's kind of similar across most sports as well, like college and done, like intense, and then maybe some pickup leagues or whatever. But
yeah, that's what's so crazy, right? Like you've committed so much of your time in your university life for just that kind of 4 years of intensity, and then you need to go out into the real world, and you take up a profession, or you go back to do a master's or whatnot. But yeah, I guess your whole life growing up in school and in high school, you're always recruiting for that end goal of playing at a division 1 level, and then it just kind of gets taken away at the end of it.
Yeah, that's intense and a little baffling, I suppose, with the state. It's so big. There's so many ex-athletes because so many people go that route to obviously try to afford college and get a good education, and yet nothing has grown out of it. all these athletes around, and there still is no structured league in many sports and stuff. It's mental how that's happened.
Yeah, and I guess it takes people that have the passion or the energy that want to see the sport continue to grow on. That's the biggest thing I was always worried about, especially growing up in California, is that since there are so few universities that play it at a division level, that the youth don't have much to look up to or have to aspire to if they're not seeing it that frequently. And again, luckily in other areas like the East Coast, there are a lot more programs to choose from. But in our area, you know, the sport could very well die out without continued efforts to grow it and make sure the youth are aware of it. And yeah, coming here, it's just such a different perspective to see how many are in our club and how many clubs there are. And again, the knowledge about the sport and the awareness of the game, where so many of my friends, when I was younger, I would say field hockey and they would say, what's that? They had no idea what the sport was, which is just mental, you say.
It's crazy. And that's still with it being such a minority sport here. And even that, like, it's still got more exposure and more people know about it, which is kind of crazy. So was it always on with your mum being Irish and everything and having that Irish connection, was coming and playing hockey here always on the cards, or like coming and working here knowing, and if you were still, you know, of an age to play, that you'd get the opportunity to do it? Or did that just kind of come as a happy coincidence? You got the job and was like, oh great, I get to play hockey.
Yeah, I think it's more of the happy coincidence that I was going to come to Dublin, and I knew then that there was going to be a hockey scene. Yeah, for context and everything. So my mom grew up, born and raised in Kildare. So she has all of her family still here. I was adopted from China as a baby. So if people are wondering where the Irish side comes in, but we came here all the time when I was growing up. In my summers, we would come visit the family. And again, hockey was always part of my childhood growing up. And I think a couple of my cousins played in school as well, or they at least played GAA or other Irish sports. So yeah, with coming to Dublin, I think it was, for me, the decision was more of life. Like I wanted to come abroad for a while, wanted to travel internationally and work internationally. And Dublin made sense because I had such a connection to Ireland. There's a lot of companies out here and I got the job. So it was mostly me moving for career and kind of personal reasons, but it was a great coincidence that I knew hockey could, you know, very well be part of my life here. And I actually feel I made a conscious decision that I wanted it to be. So when I first moved, I brought everything with me. I brought my stick, my old turf shoes. So I came with it prepared to join a club. A girl in Google and work actually played on the team, and that's how I found Pembroke. But I had heard it from quite a few people, and I knew it was close to the office, close to where I lived at home, so it was a natural fit and decision into the club. But yeah, it's been a great addition back into my life and helped me have just a different social setting, because it's hard when you're an expat and you're coming here. Again, I had roots, I had a family, but again, to build friends and build a network here of people outside of work can be difficult. And I think Pembroke gave that to me naturally when I moved over.
It's great to hear. And I think it is one of the great things about sport in general, but also the hockey community. Like, it's small wherever you go. So it makes it really easy to kind of jump in, and everyone's always welcoming. So it's like, oh, come on in. Hockey's a little community. Yeah. Or there's already that community vibe, and always happy to pull people in. But it's a great way, like you said, you've got family, but for that friends group outside of the couple of people you work with who you can go and have a drink with, it's an immediate group of friends once you're in a team that I don't think you can be afforded in many other ways. It's one of the great perks of sport, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, it doesn't have to always be sport for people, but having something else, another hobby on the outside where you actively say, I'm going to get involved in, especially moving to a new country, I think just helps you set up roots and a routine and making the place a home, and not just like I live here and work here. So yeah, I'm very happy that I was adamant to bring all of my hockey gear. When I was packing my bags and stuff, you know, obviously I had all my clothes and other essentials, and like my mom was like, you have so much stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I have to bring my hockey gear because I don't want to pay for, you know, equipment when I come over. I already have a very good stick and my turf shoes. I don't need to buy it there. So it was coming with me either way.
Absolutely. But that like act of putting your stuff in there, that like manifests it straight off the bat, because you know that's already going to be in the back of your head. It's fascinating. And do you find it okay settling into Pembroke?
Yeah, definitely. Again, getting used to how like league and the season works, and also the different like teams within Pembroke. I was so surprised to see how many that we do have. We're massive as a club, but I didn't understand at the beginning like the preseason, and someone had told me, well, when you go to preseason, you can actually go to other clubs and also play in their preseason. And I was like, what do you mean you can do that? Why would you do that? Aren't you just committing to one club? So I had a very kind of American rigid mindset in that way that, you go to one club and one club only. And, they said, oh no, you can shop around. And that's kind of them trying to also bring you into the club. But again, having known a couple people or just names in the club from coworkers, and I actually brought another colleague that I had met through Google. I brought her down, Bassi, if you remember her from the threes. So I met her at work, and I'd heard she played field hockey in South Africa. And I said, oh, I'm going to join this club. I didn't know anyone. Do you want to come with me? Let's go to this social hockey in the summer. Because I had moved in May. So yeah, about June or July was the first time I'd ever come to the club. So I said, Bassi, come down with me. I'm not going to have friends, so come with me. And she ended up playing on the threes with me too. So I kind of dragged her into it, but it was nice to have another familiar face. And yeah, I found the club people were very welcoming and kind at the beginning in trainings, but I think it definitely took time for me to get used to the way of how the sessions run, or how the club is and the league runs. There's different cups, and then there's league, and I wasn't familiar with it. But yeah, I had a good time. And again, I thought it was a pretty big commitment at first. Like I was like, oh, I don't want to make this, a job again, how I already had it in the States. I was like, this is purely going to be social, but the competitive side of me obviously comes out always. But yeah, I'm happy and love the girls on the team now.
Yeah, I suppose the commitment that you would have had in college, even though you're still very committed, you got training twice a week and you got your matches, it's still like nothing on the commitment that you probably would have been used to. And did you find that switch, that change was almost, did you ever find it was understimulating? Like, God, I need more training. Or was it like kind of a happy medium, just enough that you get out there and have a run around, get your match of the weekend, but it wasn't completely sort of overwhelming and all encompassing?
Yeah, I think it's a good medium for me because, again, when I was playing in university, I know school and, of course, classes were super important in a lot of the time, but like 40-hour work week compared to college is very different. So I honestly think I could maybe do 3 sessions per week, but more than that, plus a match and weekend, I don't know, like then you don't have much social time in the evenings for yourself or with friends if you're, if 3 days of your weekday are already taken. So I'm personally happy with 2 trainings and then the Saturday match. But I think, again, it's in context of that I'm now working full time, and even sometimes an earlier training slot could be hard for me to get out of work on time, depending on the weeks and the days. But I think it's a good social aspect, right? Like you get to, you're looking forward to it after work, a great release for the well-being in my mind after a long day at work, get to run around, see friends, and then you have a Saturday match to look forward to as well. And it just gives you that routine and schedule in life, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's spot on. It's funny you mentioned the three days a week. I think that's kind of the place that, like, I think the Div 1, the EY teams probably need to get to that place, because the ones that win it every year, you'll usually dig in and find that they're actually doing a 3rd session a week.
Yeah.
Sure enough, the ones who aren't doing that aren't really competing. They're competing, but they're not winning. So, and if we ever want to compete with the continent, I think 3 days a week is going to be necessary. But I don't think anyone's going to make that switch just yet, because we're used to that. Like, if you cut like 6 sessions a week down to 2 or down to 3, it's not. It's a bit of a load off. But that's for another day. So Google, were you in Google already and transferred within the company, or did you get the job here?
I got the job here. I was with Microsoft in the States, so relevant competitor, I suppose. So I was doing a similar type of role in the States before. The chance to move internationally with them wasn't as available at the time. And my cousin actually works in Google here, and she said, "Look, we're hiring. Would you be interested?" And applied. I actually at the time didn't think they would support me with a visa. Just the role potentially didn't have the scope for kind of international mobility. But anyway, at the end, I did get the visa. So I initially moved to Ireland and joined Google on a work permit or work visa. And then like 6 months later, I got my Irish passport. So got my dual citizenship right after I moved, which is kind of timely. But yeah, that was kind of a process in itself. As an adoptee, it's actually a lot harder or a lot longer of paperwork and application process to get dual citizenship, because I had applied and then we didn't know there was this extra certification to do. But we had to essentially certify my adoption in Ireland, because at the time when I applied for my passport, it was just in the States.
Ah. So
So
that's mad. I always assumed, and obviously it, would be a little bit ignorant on this. I always assumed that, you know, wherever you're adopted, that immediately you're in the family and whatnot, and that would be recognized wherever. Never even considered the fact that that wouldn't be recognized here, and therefore, so legally in Ireland, were you essentially a stranger to your own family, like legally on paper?
I guess on paper, yeah, but since I always grew up in the States, we never even kind of crossed that path of like, do we need to do something in Ireland?
Yeah.
My mom's a citizen, a dual citizen, of course, and that's when we had explored it. When I was kind of in the later years of college, my mom said, "Oh, we should get you your passport. It would be great if you ever did want to work abroad." So, you know, in the background, my mom had applied on my behalf, and then that's when they came back saying, "Nope, you actually need to certify your adoption in Ireland, and then you can reapply." Because of course the children of Irish born are able to get passports. I even think it goes as far as a grandparent. If you have a grandparent born here, you're eligible, but definitely for a child. So yeah, she was working on that in my last years of college, got declined, and then we came here. It's actually on Shelburne Road, I think, in Ballsbridge. This Adoption Authority of Ireland. So we were here separately for a visit to the family, and we said we'll just pop in and do the documents and the paperwork. So we scheduled this meeting to meet with the Adoption Authority of Ireland. Sounds very scary, but you go in and there's like a little playroom, because it's obviously, you know, probably a lot of kids going in and formalizing the process as you know, being adopted younger. So there's this playroom, and I show up. I was like 22 at the time. My mom and I go in, and the guy, he's like, "Oh, you're a grown adult," and she's like, "Yeah, you know." She was adopted as a baby, but of course we always had it done in the States. But we are looking for her passport, and you know, they've advised us to come here, and so he just looks at all of my documents and signs it off. But you know, Irish government potentially a little bit slow on some of these paperwork, and it took a little bit. Yeah, it took. They initially promised it would take 3 months maximum, and it took them a year to get the papers finally to us, and then on top of that, to apply for the passport once we got the certification, another year. So in all, it was like 3 years of waiting for it. But luckily, again, had gotten here with Google, and then subsequently I got my passport. So now I'm good to stay here indefinitely.
Well, at least that worked out. But
Yes, it all worked out in the end, but we learned a lot about the Irish government processes and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, Irish bureaucracy is slow at the
Yeah.
best of times. That's probably being
Yeah.
kind about it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking then, like you growing up then, were your parents fairly open with you, like straight off the bat, that you were adopted? Obviously, I know you might have had some questions, you know, coming from sort of Irish American parents. Or was that something you kind of over time was just started to get more curious about your heritage, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so my dad's American, and yeah, my mom's Irish. I suppose I would have grown up being quite aware of it. Like, I'm Asian, my parents are both white. I look very different to them. I'm an only child, so there's also, it's just kind of me in the family that looks like me, I suppose, for lack of better words. But um my mom told me the youngest that she would have known I was aware was in preschool, that the teachers in the school told her one day this, you know, Asian woman had come in to pick up their kid, and this boy said to me, "Oh, Emily, your mom is here." And I was like, "No, my mommy doesn't look like that." So they retold that story to my parents, and I guess I did know at a very young age visually that that's not what my mom looked like. Whether or not I knew that I was adopted is a different story. But again, because we always came here growing up when I was younger, and you know, saw the family here. Again, I stuck out like a bit like a sore thumb. All of my cousins are Irish, fair skinned, you know, and I look very different. I was always I guess the American cousin that was coming over. not like a celebrity, but maybe you can back me up, but I think that Irish kids have an obsession with like Americans just because of the TV and Disney Channel and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely remember it being a big deal to me to come over, but also in general, Emily's coming home, or my mom, they call her Auntie Sue. Auntie Sue and Emily are coming home for the summer. So I definitely remember it being quite of a big deal. But I think being here and coming here constantly, knowing that I looked different, was just ingrained in me. And I would say they were open, because if I asked a question, they would definitely tell me. But I almost feel we didn't need to talk about it that much. And even as I grew up, I would start to ask questions, but I've always known my identity, and I've never really had any kind of deeper burning questions. I think out of interest now I do, as I'm older and starting to be exposed to other cultures, and I'm interested, of course, in the Asian side of things, and I definitely want to go visit China. But I suppose I never had any confusion about who I was growing up, just because I looked different to my family.
Yeah, funny you mentioned that coming back. Obviously, Irish people, we're bloody obsessed with Americans, and a bunch of bandwagons. You can see it in, but very much, the American cousins coming over, the excitement around that. I suppose for them, you've got sort of the American accent and everything, so it's seeing you more as the American cousin coming over rather than necessarily standing out as much as being like the Asian cousin is coming over. It's the American cousins coming over. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, totally. Like, again, our cousin from America is coming over. That's always what I was remembering. I would hang out with their friends when I was here, or I did pony camp when I was younger. So, all of that kind of stuff, they'd introduce me as, oh, she's our American cousin. So I definitely agree with that. And I don't think we ever discussed it like, oh, Emily, stop it. It was never stated like that when I was growing up. It was just that this is our family. And I always knew I lived far away from them. So we were discussing this even recently, as we're both, we're all kind of maturing as cousins. I think we're all we're maybe 2 to 4 years apart each. So we're all kind of growing up. And I think we discussed it recently, saying that we never talked about it. Our moms never said anything to us. It wasn't told. It was just kind of known that I was different, but I never felt like I was too different in the family, other than living in California and being the only one growing up there. But yeah, I think it's nice to know and to grow up having felt like I always felt included, and I never felt different to anybody.
Yeah. And then outside the family, I suppose there's a lot of talk now, and particularly with sort of the stuff that Trump was drumming up with the China virus and everything. Have you noticed a change in how you're treated just generally outside of your family and friends, or have you kind of managed, being in Ireland, maybe being a little bit more sheltered from it? But how is that sort of more recently experienced? And then we'll talk a little bit like sort of diversity in the sport and in general in Ireland, but particularly in the climate at the moment. How have you felt about that?
Yeah, I think it's very topical. When it happened, I think that actually the shooting of the salon, I think it was in Atlanta, that was around Patrick's Day. So I was off work and I saw it all over my social, and I was like in this weird place of trying to enjoy taking time off and doing a bunch of stuff in Dublin, and then feeling like, oh my God, this is awful news. Where do I fit in this? How do I feel? But yeah, it's been an interesting one. One thing I'll have to say is I definitely don't tell people a lot now that I'm from China, because the virus started there, and obviously all the perceptions of the Kung flu and the China virus, for sure, definitely shy away from that now. And I think it's like an interesting experience to not really want to embrace where you're from. That feels weird. But I think as of like in Ireland, I would never have said I don't feel at danger or unsafe, that I'm going to be in a targeted attack. Like, I definitely don't feel that, but I would definitely feel it in California or in the States after that event happened. Like, I was for sure concerned for friends, and just, again, a very sad event that had happened there, or a sad attack that happened there. Here, I think the underlying roots are a lot more covert versus overt, and they're more of microaggressions, and they're not as obvious. But again, I think as a person of color, you potentially go through life and you think, am I just overthinking it, or is that actually maybe racism or a microaggression. So for example, like if I'm walking down the street and I feel someone is really walking far away from me to keep distance, I think, is it because I'm Asian and they think that I have COVID because of the stereotypes, or am I just overthinking it? So that could be one interaction where I would, or an experience that happens, you know, every day when I'm walking out, that I'm thinking, oh God, is it because they are seeing me as different and making their assumptions, or am I just overreacting? So that's definitely something I've thought of. But again, I don't feel like unsafe in Ireland, but I also don't feel completely sheltered from potential stereotypes or misunderstandings just because of how I look. And that relates as well, not even to just like the Asian hate issues right now and the violence. It just in general, like if I tell you I'm from Ireland or I'm half Irish, like, would you believe me? I don't know. And I think that happens quite a lot when I'm meeting new people, or as I've moved to Ireland, people are, why would you ever move here from California? I'm like, oh no, I'm actually half Irish, or my mom's Irish. I have such a connection here. And I always get the kind of double take or the turn of the head. And then I just have to explain it. Like, I'm adopted, and it just becomes me explaining my whole story right there on the spot. In the 5 seconds I've met you, I'm like telling you my whole life story. So I've always been open about it and comfortable, but I think those kind of moments happen over and over again.
It must be quite exhausting to almost have to justify yourself every time. Whereas,
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I wish I could just have a sign on my head that just says it there, and I don't have to like go through the whole explanation every time that I'm meeting somebody or explaining about my parents, or you know, why I've moved to Ireland or whatever. But yeah, it comes with it. It comes with it, and I'm again happy to share and tell them my story or educate people on it. But yeah, there are times where I'm like, I wish the assumption that I'm lying isn't there, or that they're not second guessing me, or the kind of, where are you from? I'll say California. Where are you really from? They're probably, you know, expecting me to say somewhere else in Asia. So that definitely happens here too.
yeah, the Irish it's a weird one. I suppose you don't see, like you said, it's more covert in
Yeah.
the sort of racism, and some of it's, a lot of it, or is plenty of it, is ignorance. Like,
Yeah.
island nation, predominantly white, there's still like, even I remember being younger and you'd hear people be like, oh, the Polish coming in, and you'd be like, oh, that Polish person. It's like, they're just someone coming in to work and make a living. Yes, they
Yeah.
can you. It's like, would you relax? Like, they're also doing some of the jobs that, like, this is my memory when we were younger, of like, yeah, but they're also doing like the cleaning jobs that Irish people have become too snobby to do. And like, but you're also treating them with this like distrust, and just because they've come in, like, we've done that for hundreds of years. The Irish have literally just gone all over the world and be like, how's it going? How are you doing?
Yeah.
And you're just like,
Yeah.
and we were the ones, like, what was it like? There used to be signs in New York and stuff of like, no, whatever, it was like, no dogs, no whatever, no Irish, and all that kind of stuff. So you think we would have a little bit more sympathy.
Yeah.
I wonder, is it like a that like island, a kind of distrust of things that are new, because Irish are a little bit hesitant to change as well. Like, you can see it in even just our drinking habits. We can't, you know. So we've
Yeah.
got this deep rooted like distrust of anybody that's not from the neighborhood, I suppose, which in its,
Yeah.
I suppose, even there, like, as you say it out loud, that is like underlying at the bottom of it, like, it's that fear of something different, I suppose.
Yeah, and again, I always try to, like, you know, I don't think every person who's asking me where am I really from, or who's a little confused when I tell them that I'm Irish, I'm not assuming everybody who has that reaction is, you know, with bad intent. I don't think anyone is like racist. It's just, again, you know, ignorance or lack of exposure to it that I think is kind of the root of it. And to your point, I think, again, because so many of the communities here in Ireland have, they all know each other. That's the one thing I found. Like, you know, you meet someone and you might say, oh, this person, oh, I know their uncle, or I know their dad, or I used to work with their brother. Like, you know, it's just that natural small town kind of community. And not that they Irish fear outsiders, but I think when someone is different, it's such a surprise. Like, I sometimes go to Kildare to see my family. The eyes I get when I'm walking around in the countryside, it's like, oh my goodness, what is she doing here? Or why would she be here? Where does she come from? I almost sometimes feel like I have something on my face and like, what is everyone staring at? But even if we say I go to the West Coast, or, you know, I've done a couple of those road trips and staycations since COVID and explored different parts of the country. And out in the West, I really feel like they're really staring at me. At least in Dublin, it's a little bit more normal or seen to have diversity. But out in Kerry or out in Donegal, they're definitely like, what is she doing here? So
Yeah, it's almost
yeah.
like there's like a "are you lost" kind of like
Yeah. Yeah.
voice. Which is mad because they're also the touristy areas as well, where you'd expect there
Yeah.
to be the most amount of like diversity on a regular basis. Okay, maybe not in the community, but on a daily basis, seeing tourists come through, that they would be used to everyone
Yeah.
at this stage. It's bizarre. And do you think maybe because obviously coming from, it's not just that you're sort of Asian descent growing up in Ireland, but you've also come from the States where it's so much more overt, the racism over there, especially like you were home during around the elections, right? And like when
Yeah.
all was kicking off. Um, and do you think that maybe also the fact that you've sort of grown up, that there is that extra little bit of suspicion because you're used to more, there being more
Yeah.
sort of overt racism over there?
Yeah. I think in school and stuff, like, there's more diversity. There's a lot, especially in the Bay Area. There's a big Asian American population. So in a sense, I felt, you know, comfort in numbers, right? If there's more of us, there's more people I see that look like me around in society, in public, in my school. So there's that side of it. But I think, to your point, in school, American kids were never afraid to make the racist or stereotype comments. I always found it in school, like if a lot of Asian kids didn't play sports, for example, and they would say, "Wow, you're really sporty for an Asian person." It's like, what does that even mean? What does that actually mean? Or stuff like that. So I think, or that you should be really good at math and science, and I was awful at math and science. I was really good at like history and English, and so. Or I've had someone tell me, you have great American, or you have great English, you know, assuming I should have bad English. So those kind of comments and things, again, I've been fortunate not to have anything extremely like violent or like, you know, very racist actions towards me. But I think I grew up used to those comments and those questions and those reactions. And so I'm a little bit desensitized to it. And hence being here, it doesn't faze me if people ask it. But yeah, ideally in a world you would like to see in the future, where you get to a place where those things, you know, those questions or those second guesses or those challenges back to when you say you're from Ireland don't happen. But I think that's where there's room to improve, and just continuing to like have a positive attitude about it and share it with people without assuming, like getting defensive and upset, can only help us moving forward.
100%. And do you think things are getting better? I know obviously the media and stuff, they've always, you know, put forward what is the story. It's not necessarily what the majority of people think. It's certainly the vocal minority. It's the situations. If there's an incident, you hear about it. If there isn't an incident, you don't. Do you think things
Yeah.
are improving either stateside or here? Maybe you don't have, well, I suppose you've been coming here since you were a kid. So I suppose you've got a pretty good perspective on what it's been like over the last 20 odd years in Ireland. So do you think things on the whole are improving for people of color? And obviously maybe we're in a bad time where, you know, Asian hate has gone through the roof because of the coronavirus and the rhetoric around it. But what are your thoughts? And do you think it's improving? And then we'll come to like maybe what you think can be done certainly now for just anyone that's listening, and we'll talk hockey specifically in a little bit.
Yeah, I think the media is getting better, right? Like social media went rampant after the Asian hate crime, and like you've seen all of that kind of propaganda, for lack of a better word. So I do think it's getting better. I was in a mixed emotions about it, because I felt, well, like I've experienced things my whole life. Why was all of a sudden that we're just talking about Asian hate crime, where again, we've talked a lot about Black Lives Matter with, you know, very valid reasons to talk about it. But, you know, what about us? We've been feeling this way, not only just now, the coronavirus, it's been before. So I felt this like sense of happy, but also like, again, why not before? So there's that piece going on. But I think ultimately what it's rooted in is probably the lack of education on the history of Asian immigration in the States. Again, I'm only speaking on that experience because that's where I grew up, and in school you would have learned a lot about it. So I think it's more rooted in that there isn't a lot of resource and information and teaching about the Chinese immigration or the Japanese immigration to the States, where, you know, in history, you learn so much about the civil rights movement and slavery and all of that. But yeah, I think overall the education there, maybe that's an action or that's an ask for the future. And like this kind of recent movement has proven that there is, say, room for that curriculum in history class in the States for children. But here, I've been impressed, I suppose, at the support in general from my friends and the community, and in general, like within last kind of Black Lives Matter, there were definitely some kind of protests or peaceful protests around town that I was like, that's great to see others standing up in Dublin. But yeah, it wouldn't have as much of a context of how it's been before, but you know, I think the more that we talk about it, the better it's going to keep getting over time.
I suppose even the fact that the conversation is now happening here, that is
totally
the step towards it improving, or even if it's not necessarily bad, but getting better from fine, you know.
Yeah.
So I suppose then, obviously, you know, you see hockey over here, and it's not the most diverse in Ireland. I mean, Ireland itself, it's a hard one because it's not like the States where you go over and it is very, very multicultural for the most part. You know, if you're in the city, in your towns, okay, apart from maybe your sort of hick towns in the back or in nowhere, but over here you've got Dublin, and maybe we're again skewed. You're in college, it's quite multicultural. You're in town, it's quite multicultural. Maybe outside of the pale, it's not as much so, but that's obviously changing. But from a sport perspective, I suppose hockey, particularly in Ireland, would be quite a white sport, I suppose, and that's, you know, Ireland is quite white in that kind of context. But how do you think you go about improving things or getting? I'm going to ask this a different way because I don't think I'm asking it very well. I suppose we'll start with, it's 2 or 3 questions all in one. I suppose, how do you see yourself in the sport? Like, do you see yourself represented in the sport outside of having to go and sort of watch the Chinese hockey team and stuff? Do you feel that you can see yourself enough in the sport?
I would say no. I actually don't actively watch the Chinese teams or Asian teams at all. Growing up in the Bay, the majority of other people of color in the sport were Indian. So there's actually a pretty large Indian American community of hockey players in my club growing up, and then in high school. Not so much in college, but definitely in my childhood. So I think like San Jose, for example, San Jose, California has a large Indian American population. And so it was close enough to where my club had training. So again, I think the diversity was minimal in the sport growing up. And then in college, when I look at diversity, we were international, but we were mostly international from the European side of things. We didn't have very many, Latina or Black or other Asian hockey players in my team in Cal, which is also surprising because Cal Berkeley is like known for its diversity and large international student population. In terms of the sport here, as like in visionaries or other people who are aspirational, I couldn't even name one Asian player that I like would have looked up to or know of. Always in school, in university, the like star players were the Argentinians. Like my coach Shelly like loved using the is her name Lucia Aymar, I think. Yeah. I'm probably butchering it, but yeah, we always would watch footage of her. So like I couldn't even name one player who I would think of as kind of someone to look up to in the Asian community, and nor did I actively kind of seek out to watch that. So if I see myself in the sport, probably the answer is no. And again, if I look at the club or if I look at who we play against other teams, I'm like the only one that isn't white. But I don't think that's necessarily a problem of like the club or the sport necessarily, but probably more of the population in terms of like Ireland from a diversity perspective. I think, I don't know if you've already asked me, but how do we fix it? I think just more exposure into the youth, like at a young age, to see people like me or other people of color who are playing the sport can only help, because inherently or unconsciously you're seeing people that look like you at a higher level. So that's just kind of where it starts. But I'm not sure how the answer to solving the problem of bringing more diversity in general to Ireland, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's beyond our pay grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Like, do you think as simple as, you know, making sure that if we are doing sort of the club, say, let's talk about club level, right? Is it,
Yeah.
obviously there's no simple fix for any of it, but you know, is it making sure that if we're getting a couple of sort of, I use models in inverted commas for like promotional stuff, that we're making sure that they are from a diverse group of backgrounds, that we're making sure there's people of color in there. So it's maybe looking outside of the first team a little bit and being like, okay, let's get, you know, say for example, for now, who can we work with right now? It's getting the likes of yourself, maybe some of the players of Indian or Pakistan descent on the men's side, and without without it feeling forced. I suppose that's the thing. How do you do it without it feeling forced or disingenuous?
I think to, again, assume good intent is always the best route when you're asking those types of things. Like for me, again, I would never assume you're only doing it for a bad reason. You're only doing it to help society, the community, the club, or the youth, the people that grow up in the area. So I think that's the first step, totally, to just show more representation in the outreach, in coaching, in, you know, whatever kind of socials that happen around the club is a great place to start. I think, again, I didn't always see people that look like me in the sport. Not whether or not that bothered me growing up, I don't really recall it, me thinking, wow, no one looks like me who's my coach. But I think it's definitely helpful, again, to see that other people who are growing up with the club do see people that are different to them, and it can only, again, open their horizons and perspectives a little bit more. That's definitely one way. And sorry, I don't really remember what your other question is. You can also cut this out.
No, that's okay. I can't remember if there wasn't. I don't know if there was a second part. Uh,
Okay.
so no, that's all good. And then I suppose again, like we were talking about, you said, you know, if it's done with the best of intent, you know, people aren't going to assume the worst. So what do you think, even just like on a day-to-day basis, like you mentioned, there's, you know, microaggressions and stuff that people might not even notice that they're doing. Like how can people help get involved or help make things better for people of color, and specifically, obviously, in your context, speaking from Asian descent, how do you think people can go about even day to day life to help make things better?
Well, I think, like, part of the ownership is, say, like, if someone said something to me that made me uncomfortable or that I felt was, you know, misinformed, I would definitely take the action to call it out and have like a respectfully challenging conversation with the other. But I think it's just I suppose we talk a lot about like allyship and what that looks like, and showing up for others and being there as a support, or showing that you have the empathy. I think that's the other thing. Like, we talk about allyship at work a lot, and one of the main concepts is, say, like, as a bystander, if you were to observe something, that you would also step in and say, like, actually that's not okay, or this is the actual facts. So that kind of behavior is also a way to help within the day-to-day or within the club. Again, if, say, there's like a joke that actually is rooted in maybe racist tones, then someone else speaking up to say, actually, yeah, that's not cool, that's totally a way to help improve the relations, and just in general, how people are viewing people of color in club or in society. So that's definitely one action. But I think it takes not only like the community to help, but the other people to educate, because, again, ignorance, like, you don't know what you don't know. So I personally will take that role actively myself to help others be aware. And I think, again, the onus is on both parties in that kind of situation.
You know, even like conversations like this where, you know, someone listens to it, like the fact that,
Yeah.
just stop. If someone says they're Irish, just like, trust them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool, great. Where are your roots from, or what part of Ireland are you from? Cool, thanks. As opposed to,
Yeah.
like, even like,
Yeah.
someone says they're Irish, just take it. Like, we
Yeah.
now know, I like, on that topic specifically, like, it comes up with football and on all these things, like players of color starting to come into the team. You're like, oh, how is he Irish? It's like, well, he was born and raised in like Cabra or something. You're like, couldn't get more Irish.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? So we have to
Yeah,
start changing our, I suppose, our view of what it is to be Irish in that context as well. I think almost everyone
exactly. I think
do that.
it's challenging the perceptions of what if that Irish only means being white. And having grown up here, then we need to challenge that kind of perception that, for me culturally, like so many of the things I did growing up were Irish, other than hockey. I did Irish dancing in school. A lot of my mom's friends were Irish. So, hearing that accent a lot more often than you would think in California, or coming here all the time, I think, again, it's so cheesy to say, but I think don't judge a book by its cover. I think that's like totally the first step is to just take what someone says for face value. And if you ask further questions, it's not, oh, really? Or it's not in kind of a challenging way. It's like, that's interesting. Would love to know more. That kind of approach to hearing people's backgrounds, not just second guessing and where are you really from, that kind of tones.
Yeah, 100%. I think we can all learn from that, because I'm sure we've all done it at some stage. I'm sure there's a joke that we've either told or not called out at some stage that was out of bounds, um and I think we can all learn a little bit from that.
Yeah.
I suppose, again, like, we're so connected. It is starting to change. You can see the younger generation are becoming more in tune with things like that, and they're used to seeing more multiculturalism through, whether it's following American TV or whatever, and it's starting to change. Even, you know, sort of Asian cinema has increased, and I suppose, you got Shang-Chi coming from Marvel next to the end of the year. It's like all Asian cast, and I'm sure like things like that are going to be huge. I wouldn't have even considered it. The only thing that started to turn me on to it was to how much of an impact sort of seeing yourself up on screen in like lead roles and stuff, and or in TV,
Yeah.
was actually with Orla, and we went to see Wonder Woman. We'd been going to see, I don't know, Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy and whatever, seeing all these movies, and it's always the male lead. And it never occurred to me to think outside the box and to be like, do you know what? Actually, there hasn't really been, like, say, Wonder Woman, where you go and you see
Yeah.
a strong female lead superhero just kicking ass and taking names. And it was
Yeah.
only then that I started to realize how much that would have an effect. And then sort of carrying that into cinema, and other people, like seeing, I suppose, like movies like Crazy Rich Asians and stuff,
Yeah.
getting into pop culture at front and center, not just the token Asian character in a ensemble or whatever. Do you think
Yeah.
things like that are making a big impact in changing, even just for your own identity, and sort of seeing yourself up there?
Totally. Like growing up, again, I didn't see a ton of shows that I would watch that had very diverse, like, main characters. I think the one I can think of is this Sweet Life of Zach and Cody on Disney Channel. This is so embarrassing to bring this back, but what's her name? One of the main characters. She's Asian. She's like the only character I knew of ever that was in like any kind of important TV shows that I would watch. And then, like you said, Crazy Rich Asians, that was the first one for a fully Asian cast. And it really challenged, right, like the perceptions, because the main character, she's beautiful, and she's the main girl in the film, where like in other movies you don't necessarily see women of color being the sought after woman in the show or in the film. And I think the same thing with Black Panther, right? Like that was the first, I think, all Black cast, and the only time where you saw the superhero was a Black figure. So I think that, like, definitely the representation in the media can only help growing up moving forward, because again, as I grew up, I think there were like no Asian Barbie dolls, or there weren't a lot of the, again, things that you would get to see in like that you had a lot of affinity towards, or that you saw yourself in, for sure.
Yeah, it's very much that the sort of 20 by 20 campaign slogan of can't see, can't be. And if you
Yeah.
can't see yourself, it makes it very hard to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and see yourself being there, and not just having to be a pioneer, but that's actually just, there's a path, someone's done it,
Yeah.
now you do it. And without that, and again, I suppose that's where maybe hockey needs to come in a little bit more from that side of things, and lead the charge with more programs, whether it's getting more countries involved, whether it's, reaching out to more communities. I suppose maybe Ireland is a poor example, because maybe, we're not like, say, London, where there is like a Chinatown and stuff. We don't necessarily have an area that's predominant. I don't think, anyway. I could be totally wrong. We've got maybe more in the Black community. Maybe there's more areas where it's like a predominantly like sort of Nigerian community. We probably have more of that. I don't know whether we necessarily have that on the in an Asian context, but definitely out. I know obviously Indian and Pakistan. So they will come to the sport because it's their national sport. So, you know, for us, they're going to find us to a degree. As I say us, I say clubs and the sport itself. But definitely, I suppose we need to look at ways of trying to help that, and it might even just be a bit of exposure. So we're going to start wrapping up, because I know we've been on here for a good bit, and I know you've got places to be. So my last question, and it's the one that I kind of asked everybody, and particularly coming from the high performance setup in college, I suppose, what is the biggest lesson that you've taken from sport into your life that has helped the most?
Gosh, that's so hard, because there's so many things and skills that I would like look back to. I think probably the most prevalent, and maybe this is very like career or job focus, is teamwork and the team player aspect and working with others. I think that's so huge, that like when from a young age you have to know what it means to hold up your end of an agreement, or to put in work so that for the common good, or communicate with others in an effective way. I think that's probably the biggest again, like lesson from a high performing perspective, because in university, our college team, my coach, we spent so much time on getting the culture of the team right, and getting the ethos right, and getting the kind of non-negotiables right, and making sure that everybody was doing their part to really lift the team up. So that was so huge. Like, you would, again, they always say, if you don't get on well off the pitch, you're not going to get on you're not going to be successful on the pitch. And I think that really stuck to it. But when I look at like in my day-to-day job, or in a working setting, teamwork, communication, again, responsibility, and like knowing what ownership means. And then the other thing, and I hate to use a very corporate phrase, but like feedback, that's so big, because every week in college, and I don't know if it's the same across other programs, I probably imagine so, but our coach would have a one-to-one with every player at some point during the week to say, okay, here's how you did in performance in training, but here's where you could have improved, or where you could have done better. Or we would watch our film back, and, you know, she would say, in that moment, you probably could have made a better decision, and you could have passed the ball versus taking the shot yourself, or you could have stayed in the play versus dive tackling. So there was, every single week, you would just sit there and get told what you did, not necessarily wrong, but what you could have done better. And when I look at like work and kind of the companies that have that like growth mindset, you just have to get comfortable talking constantly about your performance and how you can keep growing. And that was just a skill that was like natural to me, because every week we did it, and you just had to take it on board, and then go back to practice, and next day do whatever they said you needed to work on. So I think, to wrap up, probably the teamwork piece of it, and just being coachable, for sure.
Being coachable is huge. I think like a lot of people can learn that, and there's a lot of people that don't, and then sure enough, they don't last too long, or they don't go too far in the workplace. I think it's a huge skill to be able to have. Well, look, Emily, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fascinating chat. I think really educational. Certainly taught me a lot in there. Really,
thanks so much for having me.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Look, guys, if you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, keep checking in. Every 2 weeks, we'll have a new episode. I've been Simon Thornton. This has been Emily Catan. Guys, take care, and we'll see you again.